Hi everyone, I am Francesco Lombardi and I am leading TU Delft and ETH Zurich's tasks in the SEEDS project, which mainly consists in modeling the Portuguese energy system and in generating equally feasible but radically different strategies to make it fully decarbonized. Once we will have generated these alternative strategies, you will be able to visualize all of them and to rank your favorite ones. So let's have a look at the overall SEEDS modeling workflow. As a starting point, we will model the Portuguese energy system, including all energy sectors, heat, mobility, industry, and so on, and with a spatial detail of 18 subnational districts. From the model, we will be able to compute the cost-optimal energy infrastructure deployment strategy. That is, how many renewables, transmission lines, and storage we should install in each district to achieve a fully carbon-neutral system by 2050 at the lowest economic cost for society. For instance, this might look like this, with a lot of solar farms, some wind and some hydrogen storage. However, we will not stop here. We will use an algorithm that we developed called SPOS to generate hundreds of alternative infrastructure deployment strategies, all equally feasible from a technical perspective and all economically close to the cost-optimal solution. For instance, just 10% more costly than the latter. You will be able to filter such options based on predefined metrics. For instance, finding the one strategy that has the highest hydrogen penetration or the one with the highest deployment of decentralized technologies like rooftop photovoltaic and home batteries. This will be made possible by a user-friendly interface developed by Tallinn University. Now, it's quite likely that the strategy preferred by each of the different stakeholders involved will be very different and possibly explicitly conflicting. For instance, the highly decentralized strategy might not have any hydrogen and vice versa. Nonetheless, the interface will allow you also to realize that there might be other alternatives in between such extremes, which might allow compromising between conflicting preferences. For instance, alternatives which still deploy a reasonable amount of hydrogen, but they do so within a highly decentralized system. And it doesn't stop here. In fact, we will collect your preferences during the second stakeholder workshop in the late 2022, and we will feed such preferences back to the algorithm for the generation of alternatives. The aim is to generate, through such a human-driven loop, an updated set of alternatives with even more abundance of options around those features that emerge as particularly conflicting and difficult for stakeholders to find the compromise feasible option. But let's have a look at some more concrete examples of what you might expect from such an interface. This is a first prototype of how a cost-optimal solution could be visualized in the interface that we will develop. You would be able to see how much large-scale and rooftop photovoltaic is installed in each district, as well as how much battery, hydrogen and wind capacity, and how many new transmission lines. On the right-hand side, you would also have an overall information about the total capacity installed in the country for all technology types, for instance, including bioenergy or existing hydro capacity. In this prototype example, the cost-optimal solution would rely heavily on onshore wind, concentrated in a few districts, mainly Faro and Lisboa, on bioenergy and on a large amount of new transmission lines. Let's now imagine that we have, however, 150 alternatives to this carbon-neutral configuration of the Portuguese energy system. We could look at them through a summary table, in which some technical indicators are provided for each alternative, such as the amount of capacity installed for each technology, or the spatial concentration of onshore wind farms. And let's imagine that we don't want to have as much bioenergy as in the cost-optimal solution. In this case, we could filter the table to show the system configuration with the lowest amount of bioenergy, which would be configuration number 26 in this example. And we could visualize that again on a map. In this configuration, bioenergy would be practically zero, as you can see from the bar on the right-hand side. But we would have instead large solar farms, some more distributed wind compared to before, but still a bit concentrated in some districts, a little bit of offshore wind as well, some battery and hydrogen storage, and still a very large expansion of transmission lines, although a bit less than in the cost-optimal solution. And perhaps we can also imagine that we are not happy with transmission lines being still expanded a lot and with wind farms being still a bit concentrated in a few regions. So we could go back to the interface and filter at the same time for low bioenergy, low transmission lines, and low concentration of wind farms. At this point, we would realize that there is another feasible configuration with no bioenergy, but simultaneously not high concentration of solar or wind farms in any district and limited expansion of transmission lines. This would be made possible by an even more homogeneous distribution of wind farms, coupled with storage systems and a slightly larger offshore wind capacity in the Aveiro district. Now, this is just, of course, a prototype of what you could expect as an output from our modeling workflow to give you a first rough idea. And of course, a prototype comes with simplifications. The main simplifications are listed here. So first of all, we're not considering capacity reserves for weather conditions in which we might have less than typical wind and solar generation, which is quite important for a highly renewable energy system. Second, we are only looking at the power sector and not yet at heat, mobility and industry. And we are not considering realistic transmission lines, but only fictitious ones connecting all regions. The planned final version of the model will account for many weather conditions, for all energy sectors and technologies, and moreover for a much wider range of metrics for you to select and compare feasible infrastructure deployment strategies. New metrics will include, for instance, not only technical aspects, but also socio-environmental ones, thanks to the Musiasa model that we will add on top of these results. For example, we will provide and visualize for each energy system configuration additional metrics like overall lithium consumption, water consumption, land use, crop consumption, and many other of similar kind. So this is pretty much what I wanted to say, so thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any question or to receive feedback from your side. Thanks a lot.